Hello, my beautiful listeners. Welcome to I Wrote That, a podcast where we bring book industry experts and authors together to talk about all things books. My name is Larissa Sohan, and I am your host and ghostwriter and book coach. I want to talk today in this solo episode about editing, and editing can be a very scary topic when it comes to writing and publishing your book. A lot of times as writers, we only consider the bulk of the work, which is the writing part, to be, what it takes to write a book. And I think a lot of us get a little caught off guard when we realize we have to edit, and editing takes a long time. And while you think you might have sat with your book for a long time in the writing phase, editing will quickly humble you as you realize how many times you need to read your book. For me, when I wrote The Defender, I read my book probably 5 times before I was ready to publish it. That included reading it right after I wrote it. It included reading it when it came back to my editor. It included reading it when it came back from my beta readers. And it included reading it one more time before I published it. And then my publishing house came back and said, "We need you to read it one more time." So I did it again. I read my book a lot of times, and it's a 90,000 word manuscript. It is not a short book by any means. It took me months every time I needed to read it. So editing can be its own entity of writing a book when it comes to the publishing journey. And I want to kind of demystify that a little bit. So what does it mean to edit your book? Let's start with the different types of editing. So there's four kind of types, and I'm going to list them in order that you might see them appear on a manuscript. This is not to say that you need all 4 types of editing. You don't. And you probably won't, because first of all, it takes a financial investment to, solicit all of these types of editing. And your book just might not need it. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So let's talk about the different types of editing. There's developmental editing, which is acting like the big picture assessment of your novel. This method really works to assess the overarching storytelling issues. This type of editor will look at the plot, the structure, character development, point of view, pacing, scene dynamics, and narrative arc. So if you're worried about the flow of your story, if you think the middle is a little dry, the ending doesn't wrap it up, the beginning is too slow, you're going to want a developmental editor. I am a developmental editor. I particularly edit nonfiction books, although I do dabble in science fiction as well. And a lot of times I see pacing issues. So when you're talking, particularly in nonfiction, each chapter generally has a message, a theory, a rule, something that they're trying to spread. And the problem comes down to pacing, making it engaging without feeling like you're, just being a textbook. So as a developmental editor, those are the kinds of things I look for. The next kind of editing you might find is called line editing. And this is a review of your story from a line-by-line perspective. So developmental editing might come first. It's going to look at your big picture. The next step is to look at the line-by-line picture that you've drawn. So this will look at phrasing, word choice, and how description affects the story and the reader's experience. They're going to look at things like syntax, repetition, tenses, and dialogue. They'll also identify sections that are overwritten and maybe could be cut down, or vice versa. There's not enough meat to it and we need a little bit more. That's what your line editor is going to do. They're going to get very into the nitty-gritty of your book and give you a line-by-line feedback on what your book might need. So the next is copy editing. You might be familiar with this term, like copywriting kind of a thing. It's similar to proofreading in the sense that it checks for grammar and spelling mistakes, but copy editing also makes sure that elements such as names, dates, and locations are treated consistently throughout the text. It will also perform basic fact-checking and flag any passages that are confusing or need clarification. This is a good option for you if you are a little uncertain about where your book is going to go, what the messaging of your book is going to be. Copy editing would be a good spot for you. And then the last level of editing, which in my opinion, every single book needs to go through, is proofreading. So if you do not consider the other 3 types of editing, you should at very least consider proofreading. This is going to check for the basics of grammar and spelling. Readers might not notice errors in developmental styles. They might not notice. They'll probably notice that it's a little dry, but it's not going to turn them off immediately. A lot of books are a little dry in the middle. Sometimes books glance over things that they shouldn't. And yes, a developmental editor should pick up on those spots. But if you don't have them, it doesn't make your book a bad book. Readers aren't going to put it down and walk away and say that was terrible. Spelling and grammar is a different story. That will make readers upset if you have a lot of spelling mistakes and you have a lot of grammar issues in your text. I do want to preface this though, and I am a victim of this myself. I am guilty of it, whatever you want to call it. There are mistakes in my books. I've had it edited. I usually run my book through 1 or 2 editors. And then again, the countless times I read it, my beta readers, my alpha readers, all these different readers, and I still have mistakes in my book. And that is so common, and you cannot fault yourself for having a mistake or 2. And your readers shouldn't fault you either. Put it in perspective. You have an 80,000 word manuscript. There's gonna be errors, and that's okay. You are human. You will not catch everything. You can run it through programs like ProWriting Aid or Grammarly. You can have a physical person read it over several times, and there is going to be something that slips through. What you can do, if you find these mistakes after you've published, if people are coming to you and say, hey, there's a spelling mistake, you find it in your work, try and push past that first wave of overwhelming, for me it was guilt, I would say, of, oh my God, I made a mistake and my readers are reading. They're reading it too. And they're seeing this imperfect product. So you have 2 options. You can roll with it and just accept that mistakes happen. That's what's going to be a part of your manuscript. Or you can go back and you make revisions. As self-published authors, it's a lot easier to go back and make revisions on our published copies. For example, with my book, How to Write a Book, Memoirs, and Autobiographies, I had a mistake in there, and probably more than one, but one that I noticed really quickly that sold on the first couple of copies of my book. It was a technical error where a word got mashed in the middle of another word. So like a big error, like not just a misplaced comma, like it was a big error. And everybody was going to notice it regardless of your level of proofreading skills. My first thought was overwhelming guilt. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad for those people that ordered the first copies. They supported me. This is terrible. How am I going to make it up to them? And then I realized people make mistakes. This is okay. It doesn't change the value of my message. Sure, it might, detract people's reading experiences a little bit, but it's one mistake. And then I went in on Amazon, I updated my manuscript, and boom, every copy that's going to be printed after that will not have this mistake. That is an option as a self-published author, which is a beautiful part of being a self-published author. If you're traditionally published, it can be a little bit more complicated. You have to go through your publisher, and they might choose to not update it. And you just have to live with the fact that you have an error in your manuscript. So those are the 4 types of editing. I'll just go through them again really quickly. You have developmental editing, which is big picture. You have line editing, which goes into a little bit more detail to make sure there's continuity. You have copy editing, and then you have proofreading. And again, you do not have to have all of these styles of editing. In my coaching program, I specifically provide developmental editing because a lot of the books that I deal with can really benefit from that. And then I also strongly recommend proofreading. I will preface this by saying if proofreading is not in your budget, if you can't afford a proofreader because they can run a couple of $100s depending on the size of your manuscript, you can use Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly. It's a little bit more labor intensive and a little less personal. You're going to get generic responses and edits, and they might not fit your book. Whereas with an editor, you can kind of get their tone, their style, and you can share like what it is that you're looking for. Obviously, the digital versions are a little less personal that way, but they are a good option if you cannot afford an editor. So when it comes to editing, think of it in a reader's point of view. You are putting something in their hands that you have spent maybe years working on. You want to put your best foot forward. And that's what editing does. You are a mastermind. You are good at what you do. This is your story, but you are not a master at everything. So you are not expected to be able to edit your own book. In fact, you will not be able to edit your own book because you are too entrenched in it. You will not be able to see the little details, the minute things, because you will get swept away in the sentence and the chapter and the idea and the scene, and you will start missing out because in your mind, it's playing out like a beautiful movie in front of you. You need someone to come in with the intention of finding the errors. And that's what you hire an editor for, or you get software, whatever the case might be. But every book needs some level of editing. If it's just proofreading, that's fine. If you choose to go a little further and get developmental editing, copy editing, line editing, whatever the case might be, cool. That will only make your book better. Speaking of making your book better, when you get feedback from your editor, and this includes Grammarly and includes people, editors, you know your book better than anyone. Do not take advice that does not feel right to you. So for example, as a developmental editor, I can get pretty picky on what I think the story needs. I've read in the genre for quite a while. I've read other books that are in this theme. I know what, generally speaking, a book is looking for when it comes to this theme, this topic. That does not mean I'm right. My experience does not dictate what it is you're trying to convey in your book. Only you can decide that. So you need to measure every piece of feedback that I give you as your developmental editor against what it is that you're trying to do with your book. So for example, if I come into your book and there is a piece of terminology in there that makes no sense, it absolutely makes no sense to me, and I suggest you strike out the word. Don't use that word. It doesn't make any sense. It's going to throw people off. If that's a very key piece of terminology in your coaching business, in your practice, in your business, whatever the case might be, do not take that word out. Do not take my advice. That isn't just, it might be bad advice. And that's okay, because it's going to do two things. It's going to make you go, no, that is what I meant to say. And it also might flag to you that, okay, maybe I need to explain it or say it a little bit different so that gut reaction of like, I don't think you should use this word isn't there anymore. And often when it comes to developmental editing, I am not your ideal reader. You wrote this book for someone in particular, and I might not be them. So your ideal reader might very easily know what that word means and apply it to the right situations in the right context. I just didn't do that because I'm human. I don't know everything. I don't see all angles. So don't take my advice. It's my job to give it to you. It's my job to make comments like that and to provide you with options. It is your job to filter that advice. So that's where I'll leave you with editing. I will preface again that every book needs some level of editing. You will not get away with writing your manuscript and publishing it the next day. Do not skip that editing phase and prepare yourself for it to take a while. Depending on the size of your manuscript, my How to Write a Book, Memoirs, and Autobiographies is about 30,000 words. It took me 3 weeks to edit it. That included reading it twice and getting it back from the editors and the beta readers. So a lot happened in that 3 weeks, but it was generally fairly fast. My sci-fi novel took me about 6 months to edit because it was just so much more intensive. So your genre is going to make a difference. Your word count is going to make a difference. The speed of your editor is going to make a difference. All of these things are going to impact how long it takes you to edit your book, but do not skip it. All right, that's where we'll end this episode off. Good luck to my writer friends and have fun getting your book written.